Thank you for joining us. This is the town hall for the city of Copperas Cove for the street maintenance utilities. And we have a lot to talk about and discuss. If you have not, Kevin, do we have more flyers?
Yes.
Okay, if you have not received a flyer, you don't mind raising your hand, Mr. Keller is actually gonna drop that off to you. It has a really important feature on it. There's a QR code on the left bottom side of that, or right bottom side of that, I believe, and I encourage you to scan that because all the information we're gonna go through is posted on that website, on that from that QR code. And so everything you see today and even more of what you see is on that website. So before we get started though, I do want to recognize a number of individuals that have guided us and directed us eventually through this process, and that is our city council members. We have Christina Strophus over here. At the very back, we have Rita Hogan, Vanya Hart, Del Treadway. And the rest of our council and mayor, they obviously directed us to move forward with this. And so that's what we're doing. We have a large number of staff as well. But I'm gonna introduce Mr. Scott Osborne. Scott Osborne is the Director of Public Works, and he has the greatest amount of knowledge on the street maintenance utility, which is why he is going to present this information. As we are going through this information, I would encourage you to write your questions down so that at the end, we're gonna take lots of questions, and we're gonna try to answer as many questions as we can, for you to help you understand where we're going and what we're doing with this utility. So, Scott, it's all yours, sir.
Thank you, Ryan. Good evening. Scott Osborne, Director of Public Works. You may all know that as Director of Public Works, I'm over 8 different divisions in the city where I provide that day-to-day leadership to really maintain and advance the foundation of our city. And that's water, that's wastewater collection, wastewater treatment, drainage, and today's streets. We also have solid waste, utility administration, fleets, a couple others I probably forgot because it's early on Saturday. First of all, I appreciate you all coming out. This is encouraging to me because why are we here? The reason we're here is, it's on the slide here, we need to fix our streets. As y'all drove in here today, you probably drove down some okay roads. If you're out in the neighborhood, you probably bounced around quite a bit as you made your way here. And it's a system-wide issue that we are facing here in Copperas Cove. We're not unlike other cities. Other cities throughout Texas, throughout the United States, and really the world struggle with this very thing as far as how do we manage an asset that is brand new in the city of Copperas Cove would be worth about $500 million. That's a monumental effort. It takes maintenance, it takes proactive maintenance, and it takes money, quite frankly. So we are here today to talk about the condition of our streets, kind of the background and what brought us to this point. As Ryan stated, at the end we're going to address as many questions as we can. In the event we can't address a question this morning, I have a couple of my business cards. I'm not hard to find, but you can email me or call me directly. I've been kind of the lead of pulling all of this information together with City Council and the City Manager's direction. So if I can't answer it today, I will be able to answer it. You may not like the answer, I can't guarantee that. But at the end of the day, we have a job to do. Without adequate street networks in this city, bad things follow, obviously. You know, the property values will decline around poor streets. If you're on a Bradford Oaks, for example, you might as well have a dirt road because that is the condition of that roadway. And really, you know, decade after decade, we've had deferred maintenance here in the city of Copper's Cove because there has been no additional revenue allocated for this purpose. So now we're here about 25 years later after that, and Houston, we have a problem. So with that, I have a lot of information here. I usually talk pretty quickly, so hopefully I won't take up too much of your Saturday morning, but we'll just get right into it. What I'm going to talk about in detail today is the transportation network maintenance, what we've done in the past, what we're currently doing, and what is the plan for the future. I'll highlight a couple recent accomplishments and several pictures about examples of what more we have to do. Then we'll get into the analysis that really went into potentially, or not even potentially, but establishing the foundation and a justification for standing up a street maintenance utility. Street maintenance utility is very similar to what the city has and other cities have relating to their stormwater, their drainage utilities. This would be a utility that would be set up to maintain this vast transportation network similar to the one we had with the drainage. So we'll get into a payment condition assessment that was completed back in 21 and 22. And then we'll get into the next part. Well, first of all, the payment condition assessment quantified and qualified the problem. The problem being the condition of the streets throughout the city. A street maintenance utility feasibility analysis was then completed after the problem was quantified and qualified. And this talks more about what this utility, how it would function, what benefits the city would see from that. Next steps, public outreach, city council consideration, and hopefully ultimately start fixing our streets in green. Another very important reason why we're here today is I need everybody to know city council has not adopted anything at this point. We will be giving town hall meetings throughout the month of September. We're meeting with various individual groups such as Rotary and Simtex, etc. We're happy to come meet with you too. If you want a little bit more information, just reach out to Mr. Keller. He is the scheduler of all meetings. I think we already got about 20 programmed for this month, so we'll be talking about this a lot. But again, we are available. Ultimately, City Council's direction was to come back on October 7th and provide City Council with the community's feedback, at which point they can consider, this utility versus the concerns or concurrence that we have in the community to ultimately make a decision. That decision won't be made until 2 weeks following the 7th, so on the 21st, that is when City Council will be scheduled to take action on this. In the event they take action and adopt an ordinance, at that point, we will have an adopted ordinance that establishes this street utility. It is projected to be effective on January 1st, 2026. So that would be the first date that you would, or the first month, you would see a line item on your utility bill for this street maintenance. Our goal is in June of 2026 to start on our first package of roadway rehabilitation projects. So the goal is to gather some revenue, immediately start using those resources to start designing solutions to fix our streets. All right, so to get right into it, transportation network maintenance. In the past, there's been a progression from a solely general funded operation. I'm not sure how familiar you are with the city's funding areas, but the general fund is the biggest fund. It consists of primarily ad valorem and sales tax receipts received through the city. So back in 2016, recognizing the fact that we did not have enough dedicated resources for street maintenance. An election was held that adopted a 1/8 tax of the sales tax allocation to start gathering some revenue for this purpose. Also, back in 2016, the city council set up a small team, which was the actual street maintenance group. In 2023, again, recognizing we still don't have enough revenue for this, another election was held, allocated another 1/8 cent of the sales tax. That sales tax, that incremental amount, actually was pulled from the EDC as it was originally allocated for economic development purposes. However, City Council believed that the priority, we need to get back to our streets. Presently, we have current funding of a 1/4 cent. In the proposed 25-26 revenue, that'll bring into the city, out of that 1/4 cent sales tax, $1.3 million. The street operation, just solely the operation and day-to-day maintenance, equates to that same amount, which leaves nothing further for additional rehab of the streets. The existing street maintenance crew, they go out on the daily basis. They repair the potholes, they repair the street cuts from sewer and water connections. They provide emergency response and take care of our roads in the wintertime to the extent we're capable. They also go out and, to the extent of their resources in this, they do proactive maintenance, which is crack sealing, smaller type activities that preserve what we can out there with those resources. Another critical function is herbicide application. You've probably seen our truck around town going up and down the roads to spray the weeds that are in the gutter lines. And the importance of that is to kill off those weeds so they don't further degrade the base under those roadways and ultimately lead to a failure. So in the future, what is the plan? And that's to be determined. We can stick with the status quo, we can continue to go down this road and hope things get better, or we can secure additional funding for our streets. I do want you all to know that every possible solution to this problem has been vetted, whether that's looking at increases in ad valorem, whether that was, reducing services in the general fund to add money to this section. However, that would result in a decrease in other services the city provides. General fund, for example, funds all of the police, all of the fire, all the parks, recreation. So again, this activity was pulled out of the general fund. It's a standalone enterprise fund at this point. Our enterprise funds, they function as really businesses. So you need that revenue to cover those expenses. Otherwise, there's you'd be running a deficit and you can't have that. So, whoops. All right, so I did want to highlight some recent accomplishments, and this was funded based on the revenue we did have and the reserve balance. As you may recall, out here, Robertson, there was a streetwide mill and overlay a couple years back in 2023 that took it from US Business 190 all the way up the hill. Another recent accomplishment was Constitution. That was if you recall, that was a horrible stretch from Business 190 up to MLK. It was hard to drive down that without spilling your coffee. So that was replaced, and that's a very, very good project. We're proud of. The EDC actually helped the city primarily fund this project, and it'll be there to stand the test of time. A couple other residential type accomplishments. We redid Pecan Cove, which was in a state of failure. in 2024 and Walker Boulevard in 2025. Much more to do. Let's see. This is Bradford Oaks here, and this is current. As you can see, you look down this road and there's not much of a road left. Our street crews go out there and patch these holes, but that's basically the capability we have at this point. So that area is significant. On MLK Junior Drive, between Walmart and back to Little Caesars there, you see some work being done here, and really this was to cover the ruts and the potholes that made that a jarring experience. This is a temporary fix right here. This is obviously not ideal, but it takes care of the issue right now based on the resources we have. Ultimately, what needs to happen here is this needs to have some base repair, the full stretch of it, and have a mill and overlay to actually bring that street back up to a acceptable quality. I want to talk to you a little bit about how we go about maintaining our streets. If you think about a brand new street, you have basically a cover over that with the asphalt. Everything's pristine underneath to support that asphalt. However, as time goes on and you have, the sun, the wind, the traffic, everything beating down on that, you start to see degradation in that cap. Those can be as simple as longitudinal lines running down there, etc. They don't look like much, they don't affect the driving. However, when that cracks open, water can get in. At that point, as water gets through that asphalt into that subgrade or that base, it starts to further erode. So it's very important to get to those cracks and maintain that cap as quickly as they form to keep that water intrusion out and to prevent further degradation that speeds up on a tandem, speeds up over the course of time without adequate maintenance. Here's a couple more existing conditions. You see downtown, you see the cracks and the alligator cracking. These are substandard roads, and ultimately they will further degrade, leading to potholes and ultimately conditions like you see on Bradford Oaks, unless something is done. Robertson over here, although that was mill and overlaid probably about 2 or 3 years ago, you do see in some of the harder stop areas, you already see this degradation, and that needs to be repaired again to maintain that repair. Okay, so there's the problem. How do we quantify this? And the city went through studies in the past, but in this instance, we looked at and engaged a professional engineer to go through and complete a network-wide pavement condition assessment, and that started back in 21, led into 22. And what occurred during that assessment, we had a team of professional engineers and their assistants drive through the entire town, classify each street and each segment based on the observed deficiencies in those roadways, whether that would be those longitudinal cracks or alligator cracking or shifting pavement or potholes for that matter. So that assessment was completed over about 153 miles at that point. As you see on the first bullet point, the city has acquired 15 additional centerline miles since 21-22 as a direct result of development, residential development throughout the city, Valley Grade Hills, Heritage, etc., to lead to another 15 miles. So as they completed that pavement condition assessment, they started off with the scope and objectives. Ultimately, on the far right, you want a better pavement network. How do you get there? You optimize the budget and spending, which is what we're looking at now. understand the overall network, that was completing the assessment, condition assessment part of that, and optimize the asset inventory. Right now, we are through 1 through 3. We're on 4 in a public engagement campaign to secure your comments on this. Ultimately, the hope is to get to a better pavement network. So as this pavement assessment, these were the roadway network of the city at that time. As you can see over here in the bottom right, the pavement condition grade, think of this as grades in school, A through F. At that time, about 11% of the network was in excellent condition. And that can, those are basically brand new developments. But as you also see down here, about 55% of the network is in a poor to failed state. What that means is it will continue to lead down the path to a Bradford Oaks unless something is done. Categories on the top right, this is how a pavement condition index ranks roadways. It starts out at 100, and that's a brand new roadway, drops down to a threshold of 40, and that's when a road is failed. For example, the Bradford Oaks that you saw, and you can see all of these rankings on that pavement condition assessment, which are provided at the QR code. This analysis, along with the transportation utility analysis, are provided there in detail if you have further questions and want to get a little further into it. But if you look at, for example, pavement condition of Bradford Oaks, you're going to see about a scale of, or a score of 20. So that's beyond that failed mark, but you can see how that correlates. 21, 22 in color, you see basically the same information. You see the houses up around House Creek and beyond, the newer neighborhoods. Primarily have the blue and the green being new, or basically pretty new. But then the older sections of town, you see the poor and the failed section, which is one of the first priorities to start looking at potential fixes. One other very important fact about a pavement condition assessment is the correlation between maintenance at the start. Say, for example, you have a crack seal. Maintenance at the start is much cheaper than maintenance on a failed road, because a failed road, what do you have to do? You have to go in, you have to dig up all the base, you have to reconstruct that entire roadway. So the cost differential between adequately maintaining your your pavement and not is phenomenal. I have a slide here that further highlights that. So up here, these are all the qualified applications. This is how we rehabilitate or maintain our roads, or should be. You start up here with a brand new road. You have about 91,000 square yards. No repair costs because they haven't even started to show those cracks yet. But as you go down into aging over time, you get your cracks. About 65 cents a square yard to adequately cover those cracks with a crack seal. But it goes down from there, or goes up. For example, a slurry seal. That's kind of what it sounds like. You have the cap of your road, but this is placing a thin layer across the entire cap of that to preserve that, which functions as a massive crack seal for all intents and purposes. Your roadway looks new, and that's a good way to extend the life of those roads by another 5 years before additional maintenance will be necessary outside of crack sealing. However, as you start getting down into these, and these are, once again, in 2021-22 numbers, a full reconstruction back then was about $59 a square yard. Today, it's about $80 to $90 a square yard to reconstruct. Again, the point here is get to it sooner rather than later, and ultimately save resources that can be spread further throughout the community for that benefit. Back in 21-22, you see down here, To fix everything in the city's network, it was $52.4 million. We've experienced nothing but inflation since 21-22. This number is probably up around 70 million at this point. Despite the efforts the city has taken over the last several years to the extent of its resources to keep up with this. Another byproduct of the pavement condition assessment completed in 21-22 was run us, being city council and management, run us a couple scenarios of what's gonna happen to our citywide pavement average if we maintain the current budget. Back in 21-22, as you see, we had a combined budget of $1.7 million. That included the sales tax allocation at that point, some general fund dollars, and some capital improvement project funds, but collectively it ended up at 1.7. 2022, we started out with a system-wide average of 60, which is right at the low end of that fair category and on the higher end of the poor category network-wide. But what it projected was, if you maintain 1.7 for the next 5 years, your overall PCI index will definitely fall into that 51% category, which is a system-wide poor category, getting closer to fail. Another scenario was run, okay, how do we turn this around? That was the question that was asked. And going through the engineering analysis and the actual pavement condition assessment and what was required, said back then we need about approximately $4.6 million per year for the next 5 years to bring it up 5 percentage points. City Council established a goal at that point that said our goal is to bring the average condition of the pavement network up to 70 PCI within a decade. So that would require, based on these numbers, 4.6 over a 10-year period from that time to bring it up to 70. Currently, the city is sitting, after we started out with the study in 21-22 at a 60 average. We're currently at a 58, and we do maintain every, we update our paver, it's called paver assessment software, based on everything we do out in the community, whether that's fill some holes or provide some crack sealing or the mill and overlays we have been able to accomplish. We've kept those updated. But as you see, we are slipping to that 58. Not as significant as was projected here, but we're still seeing that, or right there, we're still seeing that slide. And one thing about pavement, the slide gets more rapid over time, as you would imagine. As soon as the roadways open, ultimately you're chasing your tail to get those back to it. So at that point, City Council, once again established that goal of where we want to go, but also determined we need existing or additional funding sources to actually be able to fund that 4.6. Going back to my earlier slide about what we're doing currently, right now, street maintenance is funded at 1.3. That's not even the 1.7 we had back in 22, but that's the extent of those resources. So that quantified that problem once again, and then, okay, let's start vetting potential solutions to this problem. That's where the transportation utility feasibility analysis came into play. That was completed in October of 23. And the purpose of that was to identify, develop, and diversify dedicated resources to city street maintenance activities, to really turn that trend on our streets around and start making some proactive decisions to actually maintain this vast asset. The approach under the transportation utility feasibility analysis, we call it the street maintenance utility, so those are synonymous, is to allocate transportation system maintenance costs amongst the residents and businesses based on the relative amount of traffic generated by each land use, quite frankly, in the city of Copperas Cove. Goal is, once again, efficiently maintain the transportation network. So let's get into the analysis of that utility feasibility study. Once again, all of this is on the website at that QR code. Okay, so just to kind of generally go over, what a utility fee is. It's in essence creating a drainage utility type system for your streets to maintain those assets. Under this analysis, basically the costs associated with it, and back in 22 we were looking at $4.6 million a year, would be spread throughout the city in terms of assessed against residential, single family, duplexes, and ultimately businesses based on an analysis based on that actual use of the system every day. So the methodology, and this is one of the key distinctions if you're looking forward to our residential town hall, which I believe we have our first one next week. The key difference between this presentation and that presentation is that presentation doesn't include a robust discussion of this methodology, because quite frankly, it's more important to the non-residential land users to understand how the city comes about determining whether you have a church, whether you have a salon, whether you have a movie theater, what that assessment is and why that assessment came out like it did. But the methodology is a 5-step process. You access trip generation data. I believe Ryan mentioned all of this is sourced from a manual that's created by engineers who conduct and have conducted surveys over the last 20 to 30 years about particular land uses. How much traffic does a church generate? How much traffic does a single family detached home versus a duplex generate? And so on and so forth. Then you create simplified land use categories, identify the non-residential parcels, assign the parcels to the land use categories, and then calculate the total trips for each parcel. There is the source of the data, once again, the trip generation manual. It's the 11th edition produced by the Institute of Transportation Engineers. That's that group of surveys throughout not only Texas, but the United States that makes those calculations. This is also the source. Other communities have established this street utility for the sole purpose of why we're doing it, to actually get after and start maintaining their streets. Austin has had one since 1990. Killeen adopted one, I believe it was back in 2016, 2017. Even little old Lampasas out to our west has a street maintenance utility for the purpose of dedicating resources solely to streets. So data on the number of vehicle trips generated. Again, this study uses these trip generation rates to calculate the average number of trips, and then it basically makes the calculations from there. In the ITE trip generation manual, they've identified 167 distinct land uses. A lot of those land uses are very similar, so the next step was to create similar simplified land use categories that really group those different types of similar uses together. For example, you have a hotel and a motel. They're very similar on the trip generation. You actually need 168 categories to get into those minute differences. From the city's perspective, no, you do not. The reason behind that is ease of the community understanding, and also ease of actually administering this through our utility administration. If I came Millie back there with 168 categories, she would pull her hair out because that would be almost impossible to get in our system. So there's some of the reasons. This was that simplified category example I was just talking about. So in the ITE, you have different trip generation for each one of these. The average is this, and that's how those were grouped together. So when we're estimating total trips as part of this utility, residential properties are assumed to have the same number of trips. In this analysis, a single family detached home has one. That's the single family equivalent. You'll hear me refer to that as SFE, or single family equivalent. Non-residential trips are estimated using data specific to each property, such as the square foot or floor space, how big the business is. For a gas station, how many fuel pumps does it have? For a car wash, how many wash bays does it have? Is it automated? Is it not? For schools, it's number of students. So as part of this study, the project team initially matched about 95% of the commercial billing accounts to parcels. Remaining parcels were validated through the CAD data system. And at the implementation stage, and even most recently leading up to this public campaign, we went back in and reassessed the entire data set and now have that completely synced up with what it is out in the community in terms of uses. Here's a map that shows the non-residential properties line where you would expect along Business 190, over in Business Park and other areas sprinkled throughout the main thoroughfares of the city. So after we identified every parcel, we identified exactly what that use was. We looked at the individual businesses by business to determine what is it, what type of use, what type of business is this, and those were assigned to a land use category. Residential customers were also identified and based on categorized whether or not they're single family or they're multi-family use, because there is a minor distinction between those two. A single family generates the one. For example, a duplex, on average, based on these studies, generates less than that one, so they're sitting at about a 0.63 in terms of these calculations. So then they went through, they combined all this information, calculated the total trips associated with it, and then actually made the final calculations. We talked a lot about the SFE. For example, that single family home was at 1, duplex is 0.55. A real estate office, when you get into the non-residential calculations, it's based on the average number of trips generated per a given variable. That variable is typically the size of that business. For example, in this real estate it's a general office and admin that generates 1.66 single family equivalent trips per 1,000 square feet. Say, for example, you had a 2,200 square foot business, that would equate to 3.7. So before we kicked off this public engagement campaign, we discussed this with City Council and asked them to set numbers for purposes of definitive calculations. Their direction to us was to, on the high end, start out with a single family equivalent of $10 per SFE. When they looked at non-residential uses based on these calculations, they could become very, very high for the bigger entities in town. For example, your Walmarts, your HEBs, Coppice Cove Independent School District, etc. For the commercial aspects, City Council established, okay, the maximum amount per month for a non-residential use, regardless of its size, is at $2,500. Again, none of this has been adopted yet. However, those were the top ends that city council was comfortable with at this point. And a lot more of this information is once again on the website. Or if you have specific questions, you can ask them later on today, or you can give me a call. So after the total analysis was completed, the total single-family equivalent trips in the community were calculated at approximately 34,000 single-family equivalent trips. Of those, about 38% of the trips throughout this city are generated by residential properties. The other 62% are non-residentially generated. And there's a breakdown on the right there. Some of the top generators based on the initial study, HEB, you have 1,169 estimated trips, single-family equivalents. This kind of highlights City Council's concern about not establishing a cap on commercial. Based on a $10 single-family equivalent fee, that would mean HEB would be paying $11,690 per month. That's not reasonable. City Council found that that is not reasonable, and therefore established that artificial cap on the top side. So that's, again, the biggest drivers of traffic in town were identified to be those right there. Estimated revenue. Top left here, draft only, not adopted for fear revenue, so please don't print the paper, they've adopted this. Because we haven't. I know you wouldn't anyway. So, what that means is, say City Council established it at $1 per single family equivalent, that would generate $407,000 per year, and after a non-collection rate, that includes the amount the city actually doesn't collect as a result of bad debt. It also includes vacancies throughout the town, so that's a 10% knockoff. It'd be about $366,000. If you recall back from the pavement condition assessment, and I apologize for my redundancy, it said 4.6 billion, so just keep that figure in mind. As you go down at 10 per single family equivalent, that generates approximately 3.6. That is a significant part of what the city needs to actually start making that headway. The street maintenance utility isn't projected to be the only source of revenue for these activities. Once again, we have the quarter-cent sales tax allocation that generates 1.3. We also plan, as in the event City Council adopts this, ultimately we'll be in a position to start getting some of the bigger things done and issuing debt. So some of this will be used to pay debt service, but that'll get the city farther down the road quicker and give us more bang for our buck to start really bringing this system back to where it needs to be. As part of the non-residential rate structure, it started with bands, and what that is that further groups similarly situated businesses together, and it eases that administrative burden of going through this. Started out with 5 bands. Right now, the draft ordinance contains a total of 11. Once again, with that cap at $2,500 for the major contributors, going down to a base fee for non-residential at 20. A lot of questions I've received on some of these individual meetings so far. Once again, how much is it going to cost my business? That's a question. That's a valid concern, and that's something y'all should know. Based on our draft right now, but it's based on the direction I've received from council, I can provide you that number. I can't do it here because I don't have the fully functioning model with me. But if you want to send me an email, you give me the name, the address, or utility account, I can pull that up and I can shoot that back to you. You'll see exactly what under the current proposal this would mean to your specific business. I forgot to mention, the artificial cap established at the top end of 2,500. City Council had a very detailed discussion about, okay, we don't want this fee to basically run out our businesses. We don't want this fee to discourage additional business from coming in, because ultimately the city is very residential in nature, as y'all are aware. To actually support the city's sustainability, it needs to develop more commercially into retail, into manufacturing, to actually provide that additional commercial revenue to sustain the entirety of the community. So that was one of the discussions. It's really those competing purposes. We need to foster our business, but we need to fix our streets. So I wanted to highlight that point for y'all. Okay, just generally other similar fee comparisons. As of the time of this analysis, it was at $17.87 in Austin. I believe they recently went up to about $19.50. And then down the road here to Killeen at 10, I believe Lampasas was at 7. So those are kind of the range in some of the communities that are utilizing this for this purpose. We'd like to mention that all revenue derived from the street maintenance utility would be dedicated solely to street maintenance. I believe I alluded to that earlier, but this is not utilized for police or fire or better parks. The sole purpose is for street maintenance utility. It's written into the ordinance like that, similar to the drainage utility. All of that is allocated and dedicated to that purpose. So just to alleviate that concern.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Sorry. You have the residential cost on there, but you don't have what they charge commercial side. Is there a reason why we're not showing what each of those, because like Lampasas, I have a business in Lampasas, we're charged
Yes.
7 across the board,
Right.
whether it's residential or commercial. So are we not showing those commercial costs in there? Sorry.
And no, that's a perfectly valid question. The reason that's not shown in there is because every community does it different. Quite frankly, City of Austin based it on a developed acreage type scheme. City of Killeen established various different exceptions and caps, etc. So there's really no rhyme to reason of how they've assessed it. What we've tried to do is stay true to the actual analysis and that proportionality, which from my previous life as a city attorney is very important to validity of this. There needs to be a nexus between that impact, that demand, and that cost throughout the community, and that's why we've stayed true to that system. Other communities, you know, God bless them, I don't see it, but that's they make their calculations how they do it.
Is there any way we could get that information? Because I think this is great to see for residential. You know, we're kind of in the higher population ballpark there.
Right.
But I would like to see comparisons with other cities.
Okay.
What do schools, I mean, you know, it sounds like, oh, $2,500 a month, that doesn't seem like much, but when you add it times 12, it's a lot of money. And our schools don't get money easily at all, especially in property poor school districts like we live in.
And you're exactly right. And I'd like to touch on the school district as a whole, because that's a huge operation in the city. It has, you know, 15 different facilities. It has, you know, serving children throughout the community, and admin and bus barns and everything like that. So predictably, it would generate a huge amount of trips per day. What it generates is about 2,100 trips per day holistically. So if there were no cap, it'd be $21,000 a month. That's not reasonable. And the school district has challenges of their own. They need to provide these services. However, they are a major contributor. So city staff's proposal on the school district as a whole, regardless of the entirety of that number of trips, is to cap district-wide at $5,000 a month. So that would be the difference, right?
5,000.
Five-
We thought it was gonna be 2,500. So
5,000 for the total, for the entire school.
5,000?
That's great.
Okay, well, I'm glad to know that because we thought it was gonna be 30,000. But I don't know, I would just suggest for your next meeting, have what Colleen pays. Have what, we need to see what other cities, and I guess we can find that if we search for ourselves, and I plan to, but, I don't think that cap is reasonable for most of us. That's just a comment. Just thank you for answering the question, I appreciate
Absolutely,
that.
and I definitely, will work on some additional numbers over here to provide you kind of an example, but again, all businesses are created differently, so it'd be based on, okay, general services or retail sales, 3,000 square foot, what do they pay? Something like that, but that doesn't really hit on other types of businesses, fast food, et cetera, but it would be a good way to take a look at it, at least gauge it for an example. Yes, ma'am. All right, so I mentioned early on that the city has looked at other potential viable options of funding additional street maintenance. I've seen the questions around town. We've had the discussions internally about how about you just raise the property taxes and we spread it throughout the entire community that way. Couple problems with that scenario. The first problem is, I'm not sure if you track with the state legislature, but recent sessions have significantly limited the city's ability to increase property taxes over a set percentage. As of right now, it's 3.5% maximum increase without an election in any given year. I believe the second session just stalled or stopped, but they had a 2.5% cap or a 1% cap on the table to further rein in a city's ability to sustain its operations. With that, and with ad valorem taxes, it's different than a direct fee paid by every parcel. The reason it's different is because there's exemptions out on taxes. The city has a very large 100% disabled veteran population. They are completely exempt from ad valorem taxes as a result of state legislation that says thank you for your service. City agrees with that. It is a wonderful benefit for our retired service members, absolutely. What it does to the city is reduce our ad valorem revenue receipts by about 20% per year. That's about $3 million. We've been trying to push through legislation that evenly allocates that impact on disproportionately impacted communities such as Cove, allocated throughout the entire city or the entire state. Let's all share in this benefit. That hasn't happened to date. So we do receive a reimbursement of a portion of that $3 million from the state. I believe this year was about $400,000. Next year is projected to go down to about $250,000. So you're recovering very little of that from that reimbursement. But we asked our professional to look in and compare an ad valorem increase versus a street maintenance utility assessment. And they went through this. It says basically 1 penny on tax generates approximately $200,000 with an average homestead value of about $176,000. A tub of 55 cents per month would generate 20 or 200,000. So in essence, to achieve the same revenue based on all of those exemptions and caps, an average resident would pay $17-18 more per year with a 1 penny tax increase than a corresponding amount with the transportation utility fee. So that option has been discussed at length. It has been evaluated, based on city council's, recent, or discussions. That's not the most feasible way to get at this. So the conclusions of that utility feasibility analysis, $0.25 once again is not enough to do what we need to do to maintain and rehabilitate our streets. These street maintenance utility are established in other communities. They're proven, and an equitable method of assessing these costs amongst the people in the community. And this is necessary to properly allocate the true costs of transportation network maintenance amongst the primary beneficiaries. And that's all of us. We all live in this community, so we would all pay a portion of that, regardless of status. Next steps, once again, I'm almost done, guys. I know this has been a long presentation, a lot of information. We're currently in the public outreach and communication, so we're here to talk to you, inform you about what we're looking at, hopefully garner your positions, your opinions, your questions, and address some of those. And ultimately take these back to city council so they can make some final decisions and in an effort to ultimately write down a bond and start fixing our streets. Here's my email address. You need my phone number to the office. It's 254-547-0751. I'm not too hard to find. So with that is my presentation, and we'll, Ryan and I will try to address some of your questions.
Thank you, Scott, appreciate that. So we're gonna try to get as many questions as we can. If you need to leave, feel free to leave, but we will stay here and try to answer questions as we can. So, yes, sir.
So, I came in a little late, so I don't know if you covered this. So the way you guys are framing it, you're asking for more money to do the same thing as far as make sure the streets are covered with asphalt. Is that correct?
So I would characterize it differently. It's to actually gain a revenue stream, so more money, to actually do the work, because it's not being done.
Okay. So have you guys, when you guys contact your engineers, you guys looked at other avenues besides asphalt, like frac asphalt, which is fixes with fiber or even concrete? When you guys, for commercial areas that are always turning up the roads, which will reduce the maintenance for that area tremendously?
And we do look at those alternatives on a project-by-project basis. For example, that stretch of Constitution over there, we recently had reconstructed. That's completely made out of concrete, and it's monolithically poured, so we can keep that water out of those seams to the extent we can. But we do look at those alternatives as we scope out these projects. As you're aware, concrete's a lot more expensive on the front end than HMAC. However, sometimes that makes sense, especially around the narrows where we're projecting bigger businesses and more traffic. It'd be nice to have the resources to build concrete everywhere. I know John Field and our street director would love that, and so would Kevin Foster, our supervisor. It's lower maintenance for a long time. However, substantially more upfront costs. But we do look at that, sir. Other type,
Like the fiber one?
yeah, other type applications or treatments, we do vet those on occasion, but as you know, there's a lot of snakeskin oil salesmen out there. We go through, we evaluate those solutions to make sure they've actually proven in Texas to stand the test of time, but that's something we are open to and looking at.
Okay. It just seems like I don't wanna keep throwing money away
Absolutely.
for the same thing we're doing. That's insanity.
Absolutely.
Other questions?
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
So is this gonna be kinda like the drainage fee that you all did, so like how many years ago, right? And it's just gone up, and I know a lot of streets where we are still having problems flooding, right? So where do you determine, where's this money gonna go first? What is the priority? Is it gonna be the businesses areas, or is it gonna be residential? And the other problem I have is that a lot of those streets are ruined because you got all these big trucks that come in and they're building all this stuff, and what ruins the street? Especially when we got a lot of rain and stuff like that. So these companies that come in and do all this building, are they responsible for fixing anything they're tearing up? Or let's talk about that metro company that's coming in, and we got a whole lot more potholes because they're just digging holes. So who's fixing that? Is that coming out of the code budget, or is that coming out of metro and they're gonna repave that area that they've just done destroyed?
That's
A lot of questions, I know, because as a small business,
Yeah.
$100 alone is a lot of money to, now we gotta pay. You know, it could be 150, it could be 200, or whatever y'all, this little chart y'all got going. That's still a lot of money for a small business.
Yes, ma'am.
I mean, we're not making millions like Walmart or HEB, we're a small business, and when you got insurances gone up, you got taxes that are gone up. I just don't think, and one business is not the same as an automotive shop as another automotive shop. So you can't compare the two either. Same thing with hair salons, not every hair salon does the same amount of business, so I don't know how y'all are, so anyway, go ahead.
Okay, so let me touch specifically on MetroNet and Brightspeed, who have been for the last year just running rampant through our community and making life ultimately better with higher speed fiber, right? Well, from a public works perspective, we have really absorbed the brunt of this impact because they tear up our streets, they hit our water lines, they hit our sewer lines, et cetera, et cetera. To directly answer your question, yes, we make them pay for that. And we go out there, we'll repair the leak, but then we rebuild them for not only
And you're actually
staff
getting paid.
time, and we're actually getting paid. Yeah, we send lots of invoices and they do pay. And they have to pay under their state regulatory guidance. It doesn't make it any easier on any of us, and hopefully at the end of the day, they'll be gone in about 6 months to 8 months, and we'll be backtracking. But a lot of damage has been caused, not only in our water system, but our street system, as you're aware. You know, they bore under the streets. Sometimes they're not far enough below that. They're in the base and they bubble up our roads. We got John, we got Kevin, they go out there on a daily basis and assess every area that they're in and have identified in excess of 75 areas that we're holding them accountable to repair, and that's just currently. So there's your first question, I think.
It still doesn't include the new housing areas that they're bringing in, that these big trucks have to go. You know, it's like when you built Walmart, or not Walmart, HEB and all that, and that, all that road that was built and those big trucks were going through with the dump trucks, you know, I mean, it was tearing up the roads. I mean, that's why all that concrete and all had to be repaired. So who's responsible for that? Is that coming out of the city, or is that coming under new development and they gotta fix what they're messing up?
Right, and there's a,
You wanna take that one?
you go ahead.
Yeah.
There's so many variables that kind of go into it that.
And that's part of the issue is that is a level of service that is actually increasing in our community. In a discussion that we've had with city council for several years at this point, that as we are a growing community, there are added or new opportunities for us to increase in maintenance. And that's exactly what's happening. Those companies, those businesses, those developers that are building new, there is not a mechanism to charge them for the damage that occurs to those roadways. So Scott just talked about Constitution Drive.
Yes.
Constitution Drive. We just poured that. You asked the question about concrete. We put in concrete on that road. That road was destroyed because of commercial traffic.
Yeah.
That's the reason it was destroyed. And that's the reason why we had to go in and rebuild it. So thankful to the Economic Development Corporation for agreeing to fund the reconstruction of that roadway. And that roadway has been redone properly. but we've still got a lot of other trucks going through our entire community, and they're still building, and they're still doing work. We have taken direction from city council early this year. We are starting a study very, very soon. It's called an impact fee study. Developers are not gonna like it because an impact fee says if you are going to build a new building in a new area, you need to pay your, what I would consider your fair share of the improvements that are necessary to widen a road, to make a road better, to add new water lines, improve water lines, wastewater lines, the wastewater treatment system, all of those basic utilities. That is not in place right now. And that fee would not pay for an existing road just to be repaired either. It is for the new impact of that development. So cities really don't have a mechanism anywhere to force a developer that's bringing in new trucks to build new things, to cause them to pay for the damage that is generated. The other reason is, it is extremely difficult to say, developer, you damaged that road, when 41,000 possible residents have also driven on that road.
A dump truck and a car, especially when it's been raining and all that, yes, it's totally, a dump truck weighs how much? And if you already got
Depends on how much is
yeah,
in
but
it.
if you already got a little issue that's a problem, and you got this dump truck that's been going over, you know,
Yep.
how many times a day?
Yeah, you're
You know?
absolutely right.
So
But that's why we have public roads, and even a developer is allowed to use the public.
I mean, that's true, but you bring in this new development, it's the same thing on flooding. That's where I have problems with this new fee coming on, because I remember years ago when we brought this drainage fee, because it was supposed to fix all this drainage problem, correct?
No,
It wasn't? So
No.
what is that fee for then?
no, it is to, when the drainage fee was initiated, the plan was it would be a limited term fee. You probably
Limited.
remember that, right? It was only gonna be for so many years. And I've gotten that question before. It wasn't for just a limited number of years. Why? Because city council eventually recognized these problems are not 100% fixed. And we continue to grow, and the drainage ways themselves, they still have to be maintained on a daily and yearly basis.
So you're just
So-
maintaining, you're not fixing?
Oh, both. We're doing both.
Okay, okay.
We're absolutely doing both. And that's one of the reasons why that drainage fee has increased, why Sandy City Council has agreed to increase that drainage fee, is because of all the improvements that have not been done for too long, and just maintaining. Yes, sir.
Hold on, you didn't answer.
Oh, I didn't answer one, I'm sorry.
Okay, so now tell me about, like I said, how do you determine on these small businesses? Why, you know, let's say you got 3 paint and body shops, right? Or how many we got in Cove?
Oh, the difference between business models,
Yes,
right?
cause
Okay.
you're saying, you were talking about automotive parts, right? There's
Yeah.
what, 4 or 5 of those in Cove too?
Yeah, so I think it comes down to exactly what Scott said, and it comes down to what many other communities have done, and that is, in order to do the very best we can with the limited resources we have to use a standard. And that's why we have standards, period. That's why automotive places have standards of the amount of work that they're going to do. And salons have standards of
But
how
not
much,
all-
hang
not
on,
all.
how much effort they're gonna put into cutting their hair before they increase the price, right? And I mean, my cost is gonna be different from your cost if we go to a salon, because we have different expectations. With the fee, there is a standard, which was what was it called, the traffic manual?
Yeah, the International Traffic Transportation Engineers Manual.
Yeah, that manual establishes the different types of businesses, and it doesn't look at business models. It just says, okay, the salon generally, after all the business models that they surveyed, all of them average here instead of this
Okay,
span.
so
And
I'm
and
gonna
that-
interrupt you there
No,
for a
no, hang
second.
on, let me finish, because
Okay.
everybody else is listening.
Okay.
And so, that standard is used for the business type,
Okay.
not their business model.
Okay, well, hold on. So you're saying that, so where are they generating this information from? Are they getting this information, let's say Austin, which is whole different area, clientele or whatever you wanna call it. So how can you compare what kind of generates in Austin, what generates in Coppers Cove? I guarantee a body shop in Coppers Cove is not getting the same amount of business of what a business in Austin does. So how can you compare? It's like doing a, you know, it's, I don't see how you can,
And let me address that. Goes back to what Ryan stated. It is based on that manual. That manual, once again, is based on surveys throughout the United States, throughout Texas. There's probably some from Austin, there's probably some from Houston, but there's also ones locally and in similarly situated, sized communities. But there needs to be a standard. I think what you're talking about, when you look at two businesses, they're not gonna be exactly the same. One business will have more or less, customers on a daily basis. One business, it'll cost them more to actually operate based on a variety of different things. However, you need a standard to start with that says, in general, across the United States, this type of business, depending on its size, whether it's 1,000 square feet or 2,000 square feet, generates this amount of trips, i.e. this amount of impact on the city's street making or street utility. That's what it comes down to. In the proposed ordinance, there is an appeal mechanism. And I anticipate on the front end, we'll have a lot of discussions about people who think they're a lot different than what the standard shows. And there is a process to do that. So that process will be basically provided to utility administration. That would go through myself and ultimately Ryan to see, based on the evidence provided, does that make sense and adjustment based on that operation. That being said, you need a standard. Otherwise, you don't have that nexus, you don't have that proportionality, which is one of the things the city needs for this utility.
I just don't think it's fair, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm just, go ahead.
And we'll share that comment with city council.
Yeah, absolutely.
You actually shared it with several.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean
Yeah, hang on, Kurt, this gentleman's.
So, one more question. I know you guys alluded to about attracting other businesses to help generate things. One thing I would advise not to, which I would oppose vehemently, is like data centers come in. Data centers, they got away with not paying the electric bill. That cost goes to the people around it. Everybody's electric bill goes up. Stuff like that, do not want that in here. I understand about the utilities, great, more the better. It attracts more people, causes more growth in the city, causes more businesses for locals. A city that doesn't grow dies, so I understand that.
Very good.
But
Thank you, sir.
Data centers and stuff like that, please don't bring those in.
Mr. Kurt?
Just curious about the, back to the churches. I understand each church will be taxed, fee, it's still a tax. The fee will be different depending on the size of their building or the lot.
Yes, I think it's square footage.
It's the size of the building, the actual facility,
Okay.
not the lot.
Okay, so how do you figure the taxes, say, small church like mine, Methodist or First Baptist, I think is probably the biggest church. How are you gonna tax the, I'm not trying to be arrogant, it's still a tax to me, I'm sorry. But, how do you figure out not just the square footage, because that's what the church is gonna have to pay whether people come or not, apparently. And then you want a foot traffic, so how are you going to, charge that part, the amount of people that drive to church, drive home, whatever? are you gonna go by like how many parking spots are available and tax it that way, or how many they're allowed to seat and pretend that they're always full?
No, it's solely based on that square footage of the actual facility. It does not get down into, you know, okay, we got folks walking to church, we got folks being bused to church, we got folks coming to and from church in their own vehicle. Again, it goes back to those nationwide surveys. On average, for 1,000 square feet, congregation anywhere generates this amount. And that's what it comes down to, and that's what it's based on.
Okay, then I have a question on that. So you're saying square feet, correct?
Yes.
So what about a business that has multiple buildings, but basically only one of those buildings are basically what's generating the service? So how would you determine that? I mean, that's a lot of square foot.
Are these different buildings?
They're
on
all in the
different
same area, Bo, but
parcels,
they're
or-
in, you know, on this land, they're in different, you know, they all each generate a different thing. One's the office, one's something else, you know, so how do you,
Based on the
So,
whole
so I think
Yeah.
that would be by the meter, right? So if I've got 4 different sites scattered over the city, it would be by each meter, right?
It will be a line item on each utility bill.
Okay.
And I think what you're getting at is, say, for example, you have an outbuilding, right? That is a storage function of what your main business is.
no, basically they're both, one's office, one's the actual service.
Means the actual service.
Yeah, you know,
Okay.
one is where office is done and the other one's where the work is done.
Right, right, and with our, analysis, it was on a parcel by parcel basis, so the primary business, based on that size, was the one that was counted for the entirety of the size. Again, there is an appeal process. If the assessment comes in, you have questions, which you will, give us a call, we'll tell you exactly what the breakdown is, and then at that point, choose whether or not you wanna go the appeal route. I could see as part of one of those appeals is, hey, the bulk of my use is actually, auto repair versus, you know, salon, for example. Got a lower trip generation over here, the bulk of my use is here. Consider that in the calculation. That's something we can do. But again, that's going to take working through with this appeal process to get everything right. I'm not gonna stand here and say this analysis is 100% correct. There's, you know, there's 45,000 people living in the city and a bunch of businesses. It's very, very accurate though, is what I'll say right now, but it's always subject to questions.
So
And
they're
we're
not,
open to those
yeah,
questions.
so they're not even thinking about maybe just go ahead and chart, like we were saying, land passes, that business and, you know, they get a flat, residential, everybody's the same. So y'all are not even like, so residential, let's say the $10, and businesses is capped at $40, $30, or even then, that's too much. But I'm just saying, there's no way y'all are even thinking about that, going that route as a flat.
Right, there has been, to my knowledge, no discussion of doing that exactly. That would not be my recommendation for reasons I've gone through in terms of impact versus fee assessed. And the proportionality that's required for this assessment. So that would not be my recommendation. That is not city council's current direction. But again, that's a suggestion, the community may push forward.
I mean, it's like charging the school, how much did you say, 3,000 possibly? 5,000? Yeah, I mean, that, you know, technically, we're all paying that anyway if you come down to it, cause it all comes out of the tax money, right? So it just seems like a lot. I can understand Walmart or H-E-B, they're actually a business that's making money. But the schools are not out to make money. Individual, small businesses, yes, we're trying to make money, but it's a small business. We're not generating a big income every year. So it's like, it just, for a small town, I just think that's just not fair.
You in the back?
We're about to become Radiator Springs, right? Have you done the analysis costs that y'all are looking at imposing on businesses versus the loss of those businesses, because there's not a way to afford that, especially for small businesses. The businesses here generate the revenue that stay here, right? So your goal is to keep your residents here, and the residents are the ones that are visiting those small businesses, so technically, they are the traffic, right? And most of us live in Copperas Cove as well, so our business and our traffic is all the same, right? So is there an analysis of what that's gonna look like when you start imposing those big fees on those small businesses?
And, I guess from my perspective, there's no way to analyze really an unknown such as this, a hypothetical in essence, of what businesses can tolerate, what they cannot tolerate. There's obviously a range of reasonableness. And I think this utility was developed in such a way that measure of reasonableness runs from the base up through that 2,500. Ultimately, when city council makes a final decision about what are the benchmarks for each of those 11 bands, the question will be and should be, is that reasonable at these levels? So the city's cognizant of it, I'm cognizant of it as being on the needs side here and also as a resident paying. But again, to directly answer your question, that analysis is too hypothetical, but there is a reasonableness factor, absolutely.
And I think the question is very similar to a previous question we received in this presentation. And that is, the comment really was, this fee is gonna put businesses out of business. That's what the comment was. And I can fully appreciate that. I can, because I've seen it happen here. We've had a lot of businesses come and a lot of businesses go. I would ask the businesses to consider a different perspective also. Not to change your perspective, just consider a different perspective. And that other perspective is, if we don't fix our streets, what businesses are going to close? And what businesses will not come here if we also don't fix our streets?
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to completely say, oh, well, the fee's not, it doesn't matter about the fee, because then we'll have business closed. I'm not saying that. I'm in a position where I've got to look holistically across both sides of this situation of maintaining our streets. So I understand that. I would just ask, as a small business and as other business owners, consider the other end. If we don't do our streets, what happens?
I don't really think that that's a question that any small business isn't considering. I think that's a consideration for all of us. I mean, obviously, we need streets for people to get to us. That's not unreasonable to think. The fact that y'all are putting most of the blunt of what's needed on a business versus the residents, there should be an even split somewhere. And you said at the beginning, it's been 25 years that this hasn't been addressed. Why has it been that long since something has gone into play to fix those streets? And why are we all of a sudden, everything's gotta be done right now to make it manageable? I get it.
I think that's a good question too. So, I was just talking with, Pastor Lack up here, and, he asked me, at what point did this even come up? Well, I can tell you, it was 2012. And at that time, I was directed, come up with other funding options to fix our streets. And this was one of those options. And we took it to council, and council said, let's start working on that. It's been how long? 13 years of working on that. So it's not all of a sudden, this is coming. It's not an all of a sudden thing. But the first question is, why hasn't this been done in, you said 25 years? 20 years, something like that? Because our governing body, the council, in the past, probably at the guidance and recommendation of city leadership, decided, we don't wanna put that much in the budget and increase the tax rate that much to pay for the maintenance of our streets. Now, that was not necessarily their mindset. I'm sitting here 20 years later, 25 years later, trying to criticize, what they've done. I'm not gonna do that. What I am going to do is, mayor and council, this is the condition of our streets. Do we wanna improve them? The answer was yes. If we wanna improve them, here are the options. Which option do we wanna go with? Let's look at this street maintenance utility fee. Okay, let's go down the road. Let's prepare all of the background information, 13 years of information and analysis and research. And here we are today. So it's not all of a sudden. Please don't think that it's just all of a sudden coming up. But it is are we gonna do something time, or are we going to not do something time? And I would just equate it to, families been in this situation. Hey, I'm about to run out of money. What changes am I gonna make? And they have to be made now. And that's not what has happened, but I understand your impression that that's what's happening. But it hasn't come all of a sudden. Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to recommend to the council, if you guys would take facts, that we look at spreading it a little bit more equitable. 38 to 62%, I think, is not fair. I think 50-50. You know, you're charging the residential like 32% of that total when you do the math, and 38%, and the commercial 62%. Why is that?
Well, and it looks like it's 62%, because that's what was on the chart on total. But remember, city council set a cap, so now it's not 62%.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
That percentage has already dropped. I don't know, do you have an idea what that percentage of
I
revenue
don't.
generation is?
Yeah, I don't have that off, but it's substantially less than that.
Yeah,
62,
so
based on
I would say we're probably getting closer to what you're
50-50.
recommending, but
Okay.
we'll take that recommendation, we'll do the analysis, and we'll present it. to
Yeah, I
council.
mean, it affects me both ways.
Yes.
I own a home too, so I gotta pay more money either way.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about the use of the revenue. This is not going to fund staffing, from what I understand. This is gonna fund projects, correct?
And that's the goal right now. Sales tax, the sales tax allocation, as you saw on the slide, fully covers the operation and maintenance today.
Staffing.
Staffing. Mhm.
Staffing.
I noticed that.
And the basic, services that crew provides now, the herbicide, the crack sealing, the weather. This additional funding is geared entirely towards moving forward with a plan to start rehabilitating the streets. There's a lot of different ways to get at that. A lot of valid, viable information came from the pavement condition assessment. For example, you have 5 different categories running from excellent down to failed. If you hit a category that is teetering on the failed line and you actually do some lower cost rehabilitation, you can bring that back up to a good state before it slips into a poor state and we have to reconstruct that road. So the quicker we get to it's, approaches like that. We also have, as part of this, as part of the city's capital improvement plan right now, taking a neighborhood by neighborhood approach in some of these larger areas, because in the past, we've had, this department's had enough resources to go primarily down arterial roads, the main thoroughfares, but nothing for the branching out areas of town. With that, if you're constantly only focusing on those arterials, the rest of them are falling into decay. Everything leading to those arterials will basically fail at that point. So again, I know I talked a lot, it's the prior attorney in me, but that being said, our goal is to really use every penny that we get for projects. At the end of the day, all of this is dedicated, if adopted and generated, all of this is dedicated to street maintenance and street maintenance alone. No police, no fire, no parks, street maintenance.
I meant specifically street maintenance staff. You're not gonna hire more staff just for projects.
Over time, we're going to need, just like every other department, more staff. Every year, that cost goes up. Hopefully, the corresponding revenue with that that sales tax will continue to pace with that. But that's the goal.
Yeah, and I don't think, I would not wanna stand here and say, it's never gonna be used for staff.
Right.
We can't make that promise.
Right.
We can't. What we can say is, it is used for street maintenance, and street maintenance alone. Okay. Yes, ma'am?
I just would ask you one more time to, that was a long presentation, I granted, but there was lots of information there. But add that slide that tells us what each of those cities that you had listed there, what they charge for their commercial. I would like to see that as a citizen here, not just for our school district, but for our small businesses that I believe, I mean, you know, I don't wanna run anybody out of business, and I don't want to have our city, Chamber of Commerce, have trouble recruiting people to come here because of this. And I think we've gotta put on, you know, make all a consideration. If in Lampasas, you know, you showed us $7, well, that's what she's paying for a business in Lampasas. That's way different than what she's gonna have to pay here. So please, if you would add that to the QR code that you gave us and add it
I can tell
there.
you this, I'll start working on that
I
on
appreciate
Monday.
it.
Hopefully by the next time we have one of these presentations, I'll get it on there. But I will attempt to get that analysis completed again. It's wide ranging what
I
these
know.
other communities do. I mean, it's all over the board and based on like, existing research.
At least the community around, I mean, you
Yeah,
compare
Killeen.
Austin, yeah, Killeen, Amhasset, Georgetown.
Yeah.
Or Batesville, I don't know. Yeah, so I'm just saying, it's, you know, you can't compare Cove with Austin, there's just no,
Yeah, thank you, sir. Are there, commercial and resident, counts that are on Topsy Water or Kipner Water that are inside the city limits of Coppers Cove? And if there are, how will they be brought into the fee?
Yeah, the answer is yes, there are, and it's based on the use of that parcel. It's not
But-
based on their water use.
But how would they be billed if they're not receiving a Coppers Cove utility
They
bill?
already received a utility bill because they're in the city. They're receiving a drainage fee, a solid waste, fee for the services that they receive.
Okay, cool. Answered my question.
Yes,
So if and when this is approved by council, what will be the time that businesses will have to adjust their budgets, make accommodations for the next year? Because I assume people are gonna have to raise prices or find additional revenue to cover it. What do you think is a reasonable time to give them to prepare for this? And how will they be informed of what their individual fee will be?
application of the fee, if adopted in October by city council, that fee would start on in January of 2026. So that's when it would be implemented. The plan is, as we've discussed with council, is that by June of 2026, we are already designing and working to procure the improvements with that slate of funding. So we're gonna try to make sure that that funding is not only received, but then utilized as soon as it is received. It's not gonna just sit there.
So how will these businesses know for sure what their fee will be until they see it on their bill in January? How will they be notified in advance so they can prepare by adjusting their budgets, raising their prices, whatever? Because 2 months sometimes isn't a long enough time to kind of plan for a whole year's worth of budget. So will they be able to find out right away? Will they get a letter? I mean, how are we gonna know?
And there's currently not a plan to do individual notification throughout the community. Not that city council could not direct me to do otherwise, obviously. However, the folks here in this audience, the folks that will be listening to us throughout September, once again, I could provide you based on the model now, what that will be. So reach out to me, I will provide you that information, you will have that, and therefore you can prepare for that. For the other businesses that don't reach out, first time they're gonna find out is gonna be on that January bill. At which point their, discussion can be had, and we can, if there's a reasonable appeal, we can move forward with that process. But that's the plan right now.
Yes, sir. You have a question?
I can't remember the last time I saw a pie chart of the taxes. Scott mentioned the taxes that are coming in. I'm not sure the majority of the citizens know actually, out of all of the tax money that comes in every year, how much of that on the pie chart does the city actually get? It used to be only 30%. Is that still accurate?
Oh, my goodness. I don't know what the exact percentage is anymore. And the reason I don't is, I just don't recall right now. But school taxes have obviously dropped tremendously based on legislative actions that have occurred. So I don't know the exact, but I can tell you this is, of the property taxes that the city receives, that covers all and only a portion of public safety, so police and fire. It doesn't even cover all of police and fire's cost. And so that's why the sales tax then comes in and helps supplement the remaining need for public safety and the parks and recreation programs that we have, the library, administrative costs, all those things. So, yeah. Yes, ma'am.
How does this play out with mobile businesses?
Mobile businesses, it's based on a utility account. And so, that's how the fee would be charged, through that utility account. So if they have a utility account,
See you Tuesday.
they would receive that.
See you Tuesday.
If they don't
I'll
have
be
a
there.
utility account, they wouldn't receive it.
But you're based in business off of square footage, right?
Yes, sir.
So there is no square footage when it comes to, say, a food truck. And I'm just putting that out there because there's a lot of mobile businesses and there's some that operate illegally in the city, but
Very valid.
they're not going to be charged that square footage even if they have a utility, right?
But typically, those mobile businesses are using another business. And so that other business is charging that fee. So let's use a food vendor as an example. Food vendors I see occasionally in the home base parking lot. Well, home base is paying a fee, and they're going to pay that fee. They're offering their space as a secondary use for another business.
But
So home base is paying, but they're coordinating with another business to provide another service.
But the square footage of the property in which they're sitting on is not being taxed, it's the square footage of the business, right? Or is
Right.
it the square footage of the property?
No, the building.
Okay,
Yeah, the facility.
so if you have a food court and they're a property that's used specifically for food trucks, I'm just using this example. There's no other buildings there, it's simply a piece of property. You've got 4 or 5 food trucks there, there's a utility bill because they have utility, but there's no building being taxed. How are you,
And I think that's comes to what Scott said is, this model doesn't mean it's perfect in the exact Copper's Cove perfect world. And that's why we have to look on some of those things on a case by case basis. Yes, sir.
But on the food truck example, we do have one of those, right downtown on First. They have a utility bill with us, that scenario, it would be based on the use of that property, so it'd be based on the square footage of those various, food trucks to come to that amount. But obviously, it's not a perfect solution because you have food trucks come into town, leave town, don't have a utility, etc. You have a lot of similar type activities. We can't capture all of that. Why? Because we don't have a direct contractual relationship with those people.
no, and that's understandable, I'm just curious on how that wealth is spread among
Right,
everybody.
Right.
Yep. Absolutely. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, really, appreciate you attending and with all the many questions and comments. Pay attention for future town halls. Check out the information on that flyer, and if you want to contact us, discuss this in any more detail, please do so.
Just email.